Om. 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 Om Shri Ganeshaya Namaha. Om Shri Saraswatye Namaha. Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Sada Shiva Samarambam Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Madhyantam Vande Guru Paramparam Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavad Pada Shankaram Lokashankaram Samasta Jana Kalyane Niratam Karunamayam Namami Chinmayam Sadgurum Brahma Vidvaram Om Shanti 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 Om Bhadram Karne Vishwanayama Devaha Bhadram Pashye Makshavirya Yatraha Sthirairangai Tushtvagam Sastanubihi Yashema Devahitam Yadayu Swasti Naindro Vruddhashavaha Swasti nः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्ददातु ॐ शान्ति शान्तिः शान्तिः. In chapter 6, we have completed Brahmana 1 and 2. And what we are going to see in the next few classes is that this Purusha created prana in order to enter and exit from the body. And this prana is one of the elements of the Shodasha Kala Purusha. This prana manifested itself into Shodasha Kala. Like the river merging into the sea, all the Shodasha Kalas merge back into Brahman, will be explained in Brahmana 6.5. A wheel and axle example will be used to denote that Brahman remains unaffected even though these Kalas go through various changes. And finally, Guru will declare that I have shared whatever I know, and the students are extremely grateful for this knowledge. That will be the flow of thought that we are going to see. Next slide, please. In chapter 6, the student is Sukesha of the Bharadwaja lineage. After narrating an incident involving the Koshala prince Hiranyanaba, he puts forward the question as to who and where is the Shodasha Kala Purusha found. This question has a deeper purpose, not a mere question as where is somebody. As the term Kala implies many meanings. It could be limbs of a body, parts of an entity, or an attribute or an expression of a being. All this is known as Kala. We have Kala Pradarshan, Chandra Kala, etc. Right? The student wants to know how and where is this Shodasha Kala Purusha to be realized. If he is inside the Jiva, then we have a problem that he will be different from Ishvara. And if it is postulated that he is outside, far away from the body, and in the form of Ishvara, such an Ishvara can never be attained. So as long as I'm residing in my BMI, where will I know God, right? So the question is to find out where to locate this Shodashakala Purusha. So these are called tricky questions, not easily answered, right? Hidden in this query is if we take that particular Shodashakala as an attribute, then we have to say this Purusha has got gunas. And anything with gunas is tainted. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas will keep on tainting us. Gunatita is our real state. But when we say that we are tainted by gunas, that means we are governed by them. So this Purusha, if he is tainted, then he is not absolutely pure. What is the difference between that Purusha and me? No difference. So where is the question of attaining something which I do not know or have? It won't work, right? Now, if we take the meaning of Shodasha Kala as parts, 16 parts, anything that has got parts can be dismantled. An engine has got parts, you can dismantle. And that means the entity called engine will no longer be there once the parts are dismantled. And each of these parts can be individually destroyed also. That means the entire engine can be destroyed by sending it into one of those huge compactors. Then you go and break it up into parts, and then no longer the engine is there. Cars, everything that is assembled can be dismantled. So if you say that this kala means parts, then such a Purusha will be destroyed. Suppose we say this kala is an expression of Purusha, not the Purusha's part, or it is not an attribute, it is not a limb or a part, but it is an expression. Then we have to assume that this Purusha, as he is expressing various ways, he is a changing Purusha. There is no permanence in it. I cannot say this Purusha I saw yesterday is the Purusha I am seeing today. So he will become anitya. So this particular question is called a loaded question. It's not as easy and as simple as it sounds. If you say that he has got Shodasha Kala, then we have a problem. And we take it as part, limb, attribute, or expression. So we have to find out how the Upanishad and sage Pippaladan is going to open up this question for us. Now, in this query, another subtler query is also present. If we overcome all the previous obstacles and say that this Purusha is actually Atman, that imperishable self, which we are already aware of, right? Brahman, Atman, those terms are known to us. Suppose we say that this Purusha is Atman, then we will search for this Purusha inside. And if we postulate that this Purusha is Brahman, then he is to be attained in the Jagat outside, correct? Because Jagat's substratum is Brahman. Individual substratum is Atma. Unless one is aware that Atma is none other than Brahman, we will get into a paradox. Should I search for him inside or should I search for him in the Jagat? Where should I search for this Purusha? Sukesha therefore is asking, where is this Purusha located? Tell me where I should look for him. Should I look for him outside or should I look for him inside? Very difficult questions. As long as we didn't understand the question, it was very easy for us to say he is within the heart, so be within inside the heart. But the moment we understand the question, then all our answers become meaningless, right? So, Upanishad is not an easy text to open unless we have grace of Bhagavan and Guru Parampara to guide us. Very, very difficult. Luckily, our Mahatmas who have preceded us has given us the cheat codes, we call it. They have simplified it. So we can study it and understand. The Guru axiomatically assert that this Purusha is to be found inside. And from Shankara Bhashya, we have determined that this Purusha is to be located deep within one's own heart. This is the core personality, which we are currently holding with the term called I notion, or we call it ego. Exactly where the ego is, exactly where the I notion is, wherever you think you are, that is exactly the place where this Purusha is. Your ahankara is none other than this Purusha. Oh, but then you will get into the same paradox. This Purusha has got gunas, this Purusha has got parts and all that. Now, if the Upanishad is going to say further that these 16 colors have emerged from him and he is the causeless cause, then our question will be, how did he create all these things? Did he become all these things himself? Or what did he do to make these colors appear? That will be the question that will come to us. Because by now, we have realized we are talking about an immutable self, but color seems to have come from him. They're like telling the sun is there, but the moonlight is also coming. Like that, we'll have to understand how it came about, and that is how this Upanishad will proceed. With that brief introduction to chapter 6 and bringing us back to where we are in our thought process, let's enter into the next Brahmana. Next slide, please. स ईशाञ्चक्रे कस्मिन्नहमुत्क्रान्तो भविष्यामि करि कस्मिन् वा प्रतिष्ठिते प्रतिष्ठ्यास्यामीति सः he the Purusha ईशाञ्चक्रे reflected kasmin by what shall I aham I utkranta whose rising or departure Utkranto risen bhavishyami will be. Kasmin by whose va and pratishtite staying pratishthisyami I shall remain established. Iti end quote. He the Purusha reflected by whose departure shall I depart to and by whose staying I remain established or remain staying. This was the contemplative question on the part of Purusha. Ichan Chakre means he did the willful visualizing. That's exact meaning we have to attribute to this term Ichan Chakre. In Taittiriya Upanishad, this visualization is expressed as So Kamayayat Bahutsyam Prajayati. May I become many. That was the contemplation there. Here, prior to becoming many, he is contemplating how shall I enter and how shall I exit. Prashnopanishad therefore brings out another important aspect of this creation of or the theory of creation. That is prana. It is due to the prana that beings are experiencing this world. Any being that does not have prana will be like Mars and Jupiter, inert. Because prana is the one which expresses a sentiency, and sentiency is the one which is going to make us experience this world. Otherwise, we cannot have an experiential world. If there are no jivas with prana to experience this world, no world is there. Because who is there to see it? It will be like the inert areas we find in Mars, Jupiter, where there's no life form. No expression can be, life expression is perceived in those areas. Thus, this Upanishad says, Purusha willfully contemplated as to by what kind of an expression of mind I will seem to, please underline the word seem to here, be residing, and by what kind of withdrawal or departing of an expression of mind I will seem to have departed. The Brahmana does not use the term same to, but we are supplying it. Why? That is how the meaning of this Brahmana will become clear to us. We have supplied it because this apparent contemplation is happening before the Pravesha Shruti, meaning before Brahman entered into the creation. This is we call it, blueprint stage. The building is not ready and you have not entered, but you're trying to see in which way I will enter and which way I will exit out of the home. Like that. In which direction I should come in, how should I stay, and in which way I will leave the house. That planning is being done. Before the entry or expression of Brahman as sentiency in the inner Jagat, that is the stage we are talking about here. This is an apparent contemplation because actually all contemplation can happen only in the total mind. And total mind, the moment you say total mind, then Brahman becomes Hiranyagarbha. He cannot no longer be Brahman. Correct? And if Hiranyagarbha is there, that means creation has already come into being. So this contemplative question here, apparent contemplation, we have to call it. It cannot be real contemplation. This apparent contemplation, because this activity actually belongs to Hiranyagarbha, that is Ishvara identified with total mind and not to Brahman. That is why we have to see why this question is put here before the actual happening. See, what you have to understand, if you look at Hiranyagarbha as total mind, then there is a cause for it, correct? And in that cause, that total mind is in unmanifest form. So the expression of thought, which is a contemplation, is preceded by its unmanifest form in Ishvara. So we have to take this apparent contemplation as the unmanifest contemplation as to how I will enter and how I will leave this entire Jagat, which I am going to shortly create through Hiranyagarbha. That is the contemplation that Brahman is. Will Brahman do the contemplation? No, it is only Ishvara who is doing the contemplation. Then why are we using the term Brahman here? Because we are Vedantins, we know what is the reality. Ishvara is also a notion. When it Brahman gets associated with Maya, we call Brahman as Ishvara. But you and I know that Brahman is always Brahman only. Therefore, we have to say, he, the Purusha, now is a pointer to unmanifest Hiranyagarbha, residing in Ishvara, but essentially Brahman. That is how we have to understand this. And everything will become clear. Correct? Up to this, it is clear. I'd like to see your faces because otherwise I don't know whether you are following up. These are very deep topics, so please turn on your videos for my sake. Okay. Thank you. However, Upanishad is tying the Hiranyagarbha to Brahman through the term Purusha. It is the Upanishad that is actually tying the term Purusha because it refers only to the unmanifest Hiranyagarbha in the form of Ishvara, but the Upanishad is tying it to actually Brahman. That is how we have to understand that he contemplated or he reflected means Brahman as though visualizing what it wants the entire world to be. That state is what we are talking. Next slide. It will become clear soon. Ichan Chakre, this term also implies that he deliberated or mentally penetrated into the creation in the form of result or order, etc. What will follow in the next Brahmana is that he created prana And we have already seen this in chapter 1, when we heard that Hiranyagarbha created Prajapati, Hiranyagarbha created Prana and Rai, correct? Chapter 1, long time back, almost at the beginning of the session. All of us have forgotten that, right? Don't worry, I'm there to remind you all. Right at the beginning, we saw Prana was the first entity that was created. That Prana is now being written here as Icham Chakra. He is deliberating on what should I create, which will make me enter into this creation. Then the result of Prana was the expression of the Shodasakala, as will be seen. The first thing that will come out is will, etc. Order meaning what would be the possible interaction between these Shodasakalas and what kind of a result will be obtained when they interact. All that he has deliberated. The entire blueprint for our life and everybody's life has been contemplated in Brahman before human creation took place. The first objection from an opponent that comes out, which Bhagavan Shankaracharya clarifies, is that if self Atman is only Sakshi, because we have studied, Upanishad says Brahman is Atman is Sakshi only. How can we postulate that he deliberated? How can you postulate that deliberation action can be assignable to a Sakshi? Should we not say Maya deliberated and established Mahat, which is the approach of a school of philosophy? The total intellect, which in turn decided how to remain and how to exit from the body on behalf of Purusha. Purusha Prakriti Sankhya philosophy gives that approach to creation. The answer given by Vedantin is no, the inner cannot claim to have jnana for independent deliberation. It can only be aided by a sentient entity, then only deliberation is possible. Otherwise, dead bodies in this world will wake up and tell you, hey, you're not taking care of my Antim Samskar properly, correct? If the independent deliberation was there, what a catastrophe it will be. No? Suddenly, father wakes up who's dead and gone. Hey, you're not doing properly. What happened to the property dealing papers you forgot? Like that, if he starts speaking, the son will run away from him. So, that which is inert can never think on itself. It needs something to impel it to think. I have a computer in front of me which keeps track of the appointments, reminds me, etc. But do you think it is doing it on its own? No. There is a sentient entity, me, who's programming it to do it. That correct? Same way, this Mahat is an instrument. And who's wielding this instrument? Only Ishvara. Therefore, this deliberation is on the part of Ishvara only. It is implemented through the instrument. Definitely, there is an association between the total mind, and we call such an Ishvara as Hiranyagarbha, and such a Ishvara, Hiranyagarbha, in unmanifest form, he has thought, and when he manifests, he starts implementing. If that is deeply within you, every bit of the Upanishad and even the progress of how to realize will become very clear in our minds. The second objection from an opponent is that if self is capable of deliberation, suppose we say self is deliberating, that is Atman is thinking, then it becomes a changing entity. Earlier it was not thinking, now it is thinking, right? And therefore anything that is changing is impermanent. So here the answer is this deliberation, etc., is apparent. It is caused by the proximity of the upadhi, therefore not real. And so all changes, even impermanence, if one were to associate them with the Purusha, they are all apparent only and not real. So if you say that this is making Purusha impermanent, that impermanence that you are assigning to Purusha is also apparent. No problem with that. We keep it. You can say, yes, Purusha is becoming impermanent from your standpoint because you are now dealing with the apparent world. So you want to say Purusha thought and you want to say Purusha is really impermanent, we are fine with that, because if you want to live in the Mithya world as real, that's your problem. So, association with the total mind, Purusha deliberates. The deliberation is happening because of Purusha. Without Purusha, no deliberation. But it is happening in the total mind, that is true, in unmanifest form, while it is in causal matrix. Later, it will manifest into actual individual colors. That we will see shortly. Bhavishyami and Pratishtasyami. These two terms are in the future tense. Therefore, we have to understand this entire deliberation is prior to the actual creation. Even of the cosmic prana. That also we have to remember. It's not like individual prana. Now, Etan Chakre Utkranto Pratishta also implies that Brahman associated with the power of Maya of creation is of the nature of Jnana Swarupa. Satyam Jnanam Anantam Brahma. Correct? So the Jnana Swarupa's role is this Etan Chakra. Reflection of the Jnana in the Upadhi of Maya creates these thoughts. If it were to reflect on something else, it will create some other thoughts. But the power to think comes from Brahman. That is what is Jnana Chakra. Jnana is responsible for that entire contemplation that is being attributed. Now, Upanishad is very subtle. It is trying to Brahman. Because we are not talking about creation, we have to descend from Brahman to Ishvara level. Otherwise, no creation, correct? But we still have to maintain a pointer to that transcendental Brahman. Therefore, the deliberation word is introduced as an apparent term to say Brahman is not really deliberating, but in the presence of Brahman, the reflection of this Jnana Swarupam on the Upadhi known as Maya creates this decision point as to how inside this creation and how it will seem to exit. That is why I use the word seem to enter and seem to exit. If you keep all these thoughts, but if you start thinking that this seem to is real, then we are confused. Like the Nyayikas and Shankyas, everybody they have a problem because they always believe that Ishvara is and the other things are also real. Advaita Siddhartha says there is only self that is real, all others are illusions. The actual building blocks required for enacting this plan of Ishvara, where he said, I want to put as a Karta Bhokta, that is agent and experiencer of this entire cosmos, both at the Samashti level and as at the and stop. What is that start button and what is the stop button I need to put and how to enact that? That is what he is contemplating. And then he will come up with prana and then the 16 colors, which will actually enact this plan of start and stop of Ishvara. These 16 colors will later become manifest and then operational. So right now, everything is in the what you call the total brain in unmanifest state. And it does not become thoughts, but all of them are getting crystallized in the Hiranyagarbha's brain while it is inside Maya. That much we have to contemplatively understand. Is there real Hiranyagarbha? No, it is only a notion. Is there real Ishvara? No, it is only a notion. So what is the truth in all of this? Brahman alone is the truth. And what is the apparent thing in it? The contemplation that how do I enter and how do I exit? That is an apparent contemplation for which an apparent solution like prana will be given. You must go back to the chapter on prana and recognize we describe prana as a shadow of Atman. Remember? And shadow is a real entity or a false entity? It's a false entity. So that prana is materialized here is what we have to understand. Next slide, please. Sa pranamasrujat pranat shraddha kam vayu jyotiraha apah prithivindriyam manah annamannadviryam tapo mantra karma loka lokeshu janamacha saha e pranamasrujata created the prana, the cosmic prana. Prana Shraddha. From prana emerges faith. Come space, Vayur Jyotihi Apaha, air, fire, and water. Prithvi, earth. Indriyam, senses. Manaha, mind. Annam, food. Annad, viryam. From food came vitality. Tapaha, thoughts. Mantra, mantra. Karma, karma or action. Lokaha, world. Lokeshu cha nama. And in the world's various names. All this came to the connection. I think you know what Upanishad has done, picked up few random words from dictionary, assembled them, and made number 16, which is what we also do, right? Give some 16 thing, we'll randomly pick up 16 things and no connection. One end is Loka, another end is Prithvi. Prithvi is in Loka only. No, what is this? Very confusing. Anybody who reads Sanskrit and reads this Brahmana will stop reading from here and go packing. So they'll say, what is this? Nothing is clear. Swami Chinmayananda explains this very, very well. Vijay Gurudev explains this very, very nicely. He created prana, and from that prana, faith, space, air, fire, water, earth, the senses, mind, food, strength, thought, mantra, karma, and the world, and in the world, different names. All this he created. That is the 16 colors. 16 colors named under sequences is given seemingly unintelligent assortment, which is what we thought of, right? Without proper thought and guidance, would read quite unintelligent. Nothing is clear about this. And sometimes it looks frivolous. Why should we put all these 16 colors and study them and don't understand? But one who is meditated on these ideas can certainly come to understand the sequence and the interconnections between the items enumerated here. Certainly, we can come to understand that in their totality, these 16 colors constitute the world within and without. How to understand that the individual and the universe is manifestation of these colors? First, we have to understand the sequence. First, in order to form all these 16 colors, there must be a cosmic energy. Without power, you cannot create anything, correct? So the first item is prana, on which the entire creation is hinged. If a baby is alive today in the womb of the mother, means it has got prana. The baby later develops mind, much, much later. And the sense organs will develop even much, much beyond that, correct? But when you check the fetus and say, yes, it is there, prana is the first thing that is formed. So before even the mind and the senses start functioning, one should have prana. So prana becomes the prathama. Prathama means first created. We have to go back to chapter 2 when we studied prana, and you remember all those senses and everything had a battle, and finally they all agreed that prana is the best, because when prana left, everybody left, right? That is why prana is important. Prana is the first thing that is getting created. Now everybody is clear about it, that The first thing that was created in the cosmic level is prana, and the first thing that was created in the individual level is also prana. Without prana, nothing will be. But this energy that is contained has to have become self-conscious for it to become directed. If I load an operating system in my computer, that operating system should contain certain ability to control itself, correct? Otherwise, that operating system like Apple or Windows will not work. Same way, this particular prana, for it to function at the individual level and function at the cosmic level, should have a will. This self-consciousness, which is expressed as its own faith in itself, it should know I am capable. If that capability factor is not there in that life form, it will never be able to express. Now, anybody who has seen prana is there, but it is not allowed to express through the intellect. We call such a person as vegetable, correct? One who goes into coma. So for the expression, the power should have an ability and faith to say, yes, I can do, then only it will happen. Otherwise, if it is dissipated, prana will be there, but nothing will happen. It is like the bellows in the smithy shop. You keep pumping it, it will go in and out. Such a prana is only inert, it is not real. So it must be able to, it should have the energy, it should be of the form of energy, but it must also have the faith in itself. And both these must be wedded to each other. Because prana by itself can neither create nor manifest any of the 16 components unless it has got faith. So, which alone constitute the vehicle for the I notion to play the endless drama of birth and death. What is it that is required? Must first have faith. Yes, I can do it. Then only creation will start. Correct? Is this very clear up to this point? I must have the capacity to do something. I should say, yes, I can do it. The will is known as faith here. Next slide, please. After prana comes faith in itself. Faith not in something else. Faith in oneself only. I can do it, not somebody else can do it. A consciousness of its own potential strength is called faith. I am conscious of my potential energy. That is called faith. Only if prana is there in the world, Brahman can actually come down as a jiva. If prana is not there, Brahman will never be able to come down inside as a jiva. So prana is the primary function. Tat shishtva tadeva anupravishat. That is what Upanishad says. Without jiva, the samsara will become vissara. Therefore, prana is the primary entity and it must have faith, a consciousness on its own potential. And where is it getting its consciousness from? Brahman. That much we'll have to hold on to our thought up to this point. Then, when a self-conscious energy comes into play, the elements that comprise the mind are getting born. Which mind? Total mind as well as individual mind. And what are the elements? Akasha, the space element. Not the Akasha that we see here as gross. That comes later. This is ness. What we say space, it is spaceness is created. Similarly, the 5 elements, air, water, fire, earth, all of them in their elemental form, meaning spaceness, airness, you have to add ness to it to make it an abstract term. It is the ability of space to be space. It is the ability of the air to be air. It is the ability of the fire to be fire. It is the ability of the water to be water. It is the ability of the earth to be earth. That abilities are created, which is called tanmatras. Then these five elements become the building blocks to create both the gross and the subtle world. They can express both in the microcosm at the individual level. They become the sense organs, which responds to the sense properties in the macroscopic level. So sense properties are there in the macroscope and sense organs are created at the individual level. So a transaction will happen between them. To recapitulate, first came prana. From prana came faith, which is the ability to understand one's capability to create everything. And then came the five great elements, which were the building block, and the sense organs, which are inside, and the senses, which are sense properties, which are outside. All of them came into existence. So 1, 2, and 3 to 7, and the eighth color came to be. Up to this, is it clear? Yes, Chandruji, you have a question?
This faith that you are talking of, is it not the faith of Brahman to create?
No. No. You have to understand that everything is reflection of Brahman in Maya. Maya is orchestrating this sequence, but Brahman is blessing it. Without the blessing of Brahman, the sequence will not come into. So even when we say all this is happening, every aspect of it is blessed by Brahman, by its invisible presence as Sat, Chit, and Ananda Swarup. And what Maya does is apparently hide some aspect of it to create all these things. The hiding aspect comes from Maya, and therefore it projects this Brahman in different ways. It projects it as prana, because prana is a shadow for Brahman. It projects it as a faith, which is the ability of Brahman to orchestrate the skalas. And it is projecting itself as space, air, and all those principles, and it becomes the building blocks. All this is projections. So you must always keep track that it is a projection, even though it is being described as if it is really happening. Why are we doing this really happening? Because currently we are in the world where we think it is real. So the Upanishad says this is the takeoff point. But he gave you a hint saying that everything is being caused by Purusha, who is none other than Brahman. So that part we have to keep at the back of our mind and follow the sequence. Okay?
Thank you.
So when these 8 items come into play, the focal point of all these becomes the mind. And the mind then gets crystallized. Because all these experiences have to be consolidated in one's mind, a concept called mind is crystallized. That is when both the Hiranyagarbha's mind starts expressing. Up to this point, it was in unmanifest form as a mind. It now becomes the mind at the total level and also the individual level. And what are the building blocks for it? Panchamahabhutas. And how are they becoming mind, etc., etc.? Blessed by Brahman. What is blessing by Brahman? Brahman is present. How do we know it is present? There is a Sat aspect, there is a Chit aspect, and there is a Ananta aspect. Ananda, Ananda. But some aspect or some part of the aspect is hidden from us to produce that effect that it is a mind, that is an intellect, that is a thought, this is a thing, this is a word. All these are projections on that Brahman by Maya in various levels of Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Once the individual Jiva and Hiranyagarbha have become operational as senses and mind to experience the Jagat. The moment this happens, we start experiencing the Jagat. Who is experiencing? Jiva is experiencing at the individual level, and Hiranyagarbha is experiencing at the cosmic. When the mind, the ninth kala is formed, which is regularly provided with experiences of an outer world of plurality, made up of five elements, nature has to provide the mind with its nourishment. You cannot keep on using up the mind without getting nourishment. A concept was then created known as food, which came from mind. The moment you say there is mind, it needs nourishment. And the concept of food was introduced as the 10th element in the creation cycle, which is the 10th kala. Food, which is taken as though by the physical body, gets digested and becomes mind. So the mind is getting replenished continuously, like our cells are all reproduced, right? That is the food kala that is in operation. And when it is getting digested, we get vitality, which is strength, the 11th kala in this sequence. So we are able to sustain the mind to experience this world because of our strength. If our strength is not there, mind cannot experience. Chandogya Upanishad, one chapter is dedicated for it. What happens if you don't eat? Example. So we have now at this stage of evolution a mind which is experiencing the world outside, and food from within erupts out into the form of thoughts. Now, because it has got the vitality and it has got a constant supply of food, it starts becoming manifest in various thoughts. Now, when you say thoughts, thoughts can be either disintegrated and wasteful, like daydreaming or thinking this and that, or you can organize these thoughts in a consolidated, single pointed focus, correct? Both are possible. If you focus these thoughts into a particular pattern and focused on a particular objective, then it becomes Manana Shakti. And in this particular kalas, it is the 13th kala known as mantra. So tapa is actually thought, mantra is concentrated thought. Tapa is actually bursting forth in form of energy of capability of thinking. And when you channelize those thoughts into a particular object, it becomes a mantra. Mantra is, it has got a power to achieve things. Because now we are focusing on a particular aspect of creation. Next slide, please. Thoughts classified and marshaled through consistent reflection, manana, which we saw as mantra, enables the mind to direct the texture of the thoughts, the efficiency of the thought, and sincerity and quality of thoughts into actions. So now the karmendriyas are empowered by this mantra aspect, which is actually thought which becomes concentrated. So these actions that can be created could be either noble or ignoble, depending upon the texture, efficiency, sincerity, and the quality of thoughts which have become actions. Thought flow is clear so far? Thus, 14 karma evolves out of the firm thought patterns in ourselves. So every time we act, we are convinced that this is what we want to do. So when we say that that day I did wrong, please understand that day you did right what you thought was right at that. In hindsight, it has become wrong. So at no point of time you will engage in an action which you do not think is right at that point in time for you. Later on, you will discover it is noble, ignoble, or before you start on the action, you may contemplate on whether it is good or bad. But the moment you have taken a decision, you have decided that it is what I wish to do, and this is what is right for me now. Then only we do. That is the power of mantra. Mantra actually drives you into action. Mantra, please do not think it is like japa mantra and all that. This mantra here is concentration of thoughts in our mind. The focus we give our mind to. It could be both good and bad. When we do karma, the world that is created for us is a result of. If you do noble actions and the world responds because of those noble actions you do, you get a response. That is the world you will live in, correct? So, to the best of our ability, everybody tries to do actions to change the world around us. Since everybody is doing it together, a mixture of everybody's action is the world in which we live. Thus, our individual actions, we are creating a world to the best of our ability, both here and hereafter, based on the actions that we perform. Thus, all beings together is the cause of the world in which we dwell today. Please understand what we have inherited today as a world is a collection of the actions of all the people. If everybody is or majority are doing bad things, definitely world will be bad. So what we should do was trace that back and make them think right and make them do right. That is why Vedanta is. This much of knowledge, if we had, we would not have done those wrong things in our life. Noble action will get you a great world, whereas selfish and ignoble actions will cause hell right in this world itself. Vedic activities will enable us to experience subtle worlds, which are beyond the ken of our current level of knowledge. Depending on the world we live in and the activities we perform, we get an identity. The identity here is called a name. A saint is called a Mahatma because he does noble activities. A cruel ruler is called a dictator because he does cruel things. Thus, we get differentiated based upon the world we occupy and the activities we perform. Correct? No doubts in that? I would like to see enthusiastic nods. Very clear. The name we are getting is based on our actions. If you do Prohit Karma, you will be called only a Prohit, right? If you do medical work, you will be called a doctor. If you do engineering activities, you will be called an engineer. Amongst engineer, to differentiate X and Y, we may give names like Ramurthy ji, Rammohan ji, Kumaran ji, etc. That is another aspect. But the entire group of people who perform particular type of action become called that. Kshatriya, Vaishya, Brahmana, etc. All these are names which are associated with guna and karma, which is activities and the kind of world which we are inhabiting. There is, in fact, a beautifully scientific and highly intelligent connection between all the 16 items enumerated in the teaching. What a change in us, right? Before we thought it is just loose connection, and now with the explanation, it becomes crystal clear for us that this is what the world is. They form the 16 facets of the same Purusha, the great Purusha. From Purusha to color is the direction of the seeming fall of the infinite into finite. That we have to understand. Upanishad is not trying to explain creation for us. Creation is used as a ladder for us to go back to our source. So it will touch upon the essential points of creation to make us understand that what you see as creation today with all its variety falls into these patterns. And once you understood that they all emanate from Brahman, we have to trace our route back to Brahman. The story of God's devolution to become self-confused, self-arrogating man is described by the sequence of kalas that are found in the Upanishad. It says, if you feel miserable today, it is because of these 16 factors which have come. What is the last thing in that? Name. If you give up your name, meaning your identity, then automatically everything becomes clear. We have to give up our identity in the form of ego, saying, I am so and so, give it up and become one with the truth. In this Brahmana, we have been given a path to the Supreme, by unfolding the downward trajectory that Atman Brahman has taken up, and in witnessing the truth of oneself, one becomes one with the truth and hence liberated. He or she will no longer be identified with the effects produced by colors, or also the colors themselves will be seen as not real. That much we have to take home. This is the only statement you have to take home today, nothing else. All this discussion is to only tell you they are only imaginary things. Ignore them and go for the truth on which they are projected. And if anybody asks you why you're thinking, you can tell them this is a sequence in which I became identified like you, an ignorant person. But now I have become knowledgeable. I know my true nature as Brahman, on which this Chandru Sharma, Raghuji, Madhuruji, Anushaji have been projected. I am today dealing through a projections to you. But in essence, I am Brahman and you are Brahman. That much we have to keep in mind and think. Next slide, please. Puja Gurudev Swami Gyanananda gives an example here, which is very profound. It struck me very deeply, and I'm sharing that with you also today. A person wishing to measure the depth of a mirror surface cannot gain that knowledge by seeing the reflecting surface. How much ever you see the reflection, nothing will be gained as to how deep the mirror surface is. And if he has to put a finger right on top of the glass surface, meaning you have to go right close to where the reflection is taking place and put your finger there. And then you will see that there is a depth seen between the finger and your reflection. That depth, if you measure it, that is the gap that is there between the reflecting surface and you. In the same way, just by putting the finger, nothing happens. Unless you look at the distance between the finger and the depth of the finger, nothing happens. Unless you measure it using an appropriate instrument, you will not get to know the depth of the mirror. Your goal is to find the depth of the mirror, not get caught up in the reflections. Reflection is used as a means to get to the depth. By providing information about the colors, which is provided in this Upanishad, also an indication that Brahman, Atman is a substratum. The next Brahmana 6.5 will provide the method of realizing this Brahman Atman through a contemplative experience. You see that in the I was hoping, let's see, I can complete it. Next slide, please. We'll do it today. Sayataha imanadyaha sandamanaha samudrayanaha samudram prapyastam gachanti vidyate tasam nama rupe samudramityeva prochyate evameva asya paridrishtam ismam षोडशकलां पुरुषयानाः पुरुषं प्राप्यस्तं गच्छन्ति विद्यते चासां नाम रूपे पुरुष इत्येव प्रोच्यते स एषो अकला अमृतो भवति तदेष श्लोकः सः illustration is like this yatah just as imaha, these nadyaha, rivers, sandamanaha, flowing towards the samudrayana, seaward bound, samudram, sea, prapya, astam, having reached sets, gachanti, away, vidyate, liquidated, tasam, there, nama rupe, names and form, samudram, ocean, ityeva, alone, prochyate, they are called down. Evameva, in the same manner, asya, there, paridashtum imam, these going towards the Shodasha Kala, 16 Kalas, Purushayanaha, going towards the Purusha, Purusham Prapya Astam Gachanti. Reaching the Purusha, they also disappear or set. Vidyate Chasam Nama Rupe. And then their names and forms are destroyed. Purusha ityeva prochyate. They are now called Purusha only. Saha I, Eshaha, Akalo Amruto, devoid of colors and immortal, Bhavati, become Tadesha Shloka. The illustration is like this. Just as these flowing rivers that have the ocean as their goal get absorbed after reaching the ocean, their own names and forms are destroyed. They are called merely as the ocean. So also the 16 parts, the constituents of the all-seeing Purusha, that have Purusha as their goal, disappear on reaching Purusha, when their names and forms are destroyed, and they are simply called Purusha. Such a man of realization becomes free from the parts and is immortal. On this point, there is of course another verse. Next slide, please. Next slide. See, when the name and form are eliminated, the entity that remains undestroyed, Prochate, is called by the knowers of Brahman, Purusha Ityeva, as Purusha only. Saha, he has become thus enlightened after being shown by his teacher the process of absorption of the parts. You must recall the last paragraph I read in the last line before we entered into this Brahman. What did he say? Whatever colors are described, the sequence is described, please understand Brahman is the substance. So we got a pointer. That pointer, if we hold on and absorb oneself in that Purusha, then Bhavati becomes Akalaha, free from parts. And when the parts, which is prana and the rest, all those parts which we studied, or the creation of ignorance and desire and action are all sublated through knowledge, and he thus becomes immortal. Death is a creation of parts originating from ignorance, ajnana. When these parts are gone, one becomes amrita, immortal, just because of one's partlessness. But with regard to this matter, Bhavati, there occurs Eshaha Slokaha, this verse in the next Brahman. See, we must see planes of reference, then only everything will become clear. If you take Vyavahara plane, which is visible to us through our sense organs, etc., in that plane, a river is called Ganga, Jamuna, etc. We know it, correct? Ganga is in the north, Jamuna is there as a tributary to it, Brahmaputra is in the northeast, all that we know. And ocean also has got a Nama and Rupa, Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, etc. etc. And Jiva has got many, many classifications. Indian, alien, dark, fair, intelligent, dull, etc. Correct? And Ishvara also has got various Nama Rupa. Saguna Sakara, which is Christ, Shiva, etc. Nirguna, sorry, Nirakara Saguna, I think something wrong in the template. I'll correct that later. Nirguna, sorry, Nirakara Saguna, which is Allah, and Nirakara Nirguna, which is Ishvara. So all variations are there in Ishvara, variations are there in Jiva, ocean, river, when the plane of reference is Vyavaha. But if you look at the Namarupa aspect, each river has got a distinct color, taste, speed, and road. Yamuna has got a color, Saraswati has got a different color, it flows under the underground, and so many descriptions are there for the various rivers, correct? We all know it. Each color has got a particular taste, we know that also. And associated with the landmass, ocean is given name. Pacific Ocean comes between Europe and America. We know that. So they get their names, their temperatures may be different, depth may vary, even color also of ocean varies, right? And Jiva gets name Ram, Rahim, John, etc. Wears some particular dress, taste, likes and dislikes are different. All the Shodasha colors are operation when you're in the Nama Rupa Vyavaharika plane. Jesus, Allah, Shiva, Vishnu, Durga, their forms, all are Shodasha colors. So when the Shodasha colors are operating, there is Nama Rupa, and when Nama Rupa is taken as real, there is Vyavahar. Differences are seen. But in the Paramarthika level, both the river and ocean is only water, correct? So when we say river is flowing and merging into the ocean, what is flowing? Water is flowing. And where is it flowing into? Water only, correct? Same way, when we say this Jiva and Ishvara are one and the same, what we mean that in essence, they are only Brahman. Jiva's aspiration to become Ishvara is actually an aspiration of Brahman to be Brahman. That's all. So in Paramarthika level, Brahman is like water is to the ocean and river. Brahman is to Jiva and Ishvara. Essence of Jiva, essence of Ishvara is only Brahman. In the river illustration, if one realizes that it is water that is flowing and merging into water, which is as though large and stationary, and as rainwater alone, it becomes river. It's the entire cycle of water only, correct? So water was there as a river, water became the ocean, and water becomes the cloud, water becomes the rain, and entire thing is only water, correct? It's only a play of water. Therefore, Brahmarpanam, Brahmahavi, Brahma Agno, Brahmanahutam, Brahmaiva Vena Gantavyam, Brahma Karma Samadhana becomes the that Brahman, through the Shodasha colors, manifests in different forms and actions and activities, but in essence, it is only Brahman. Such a knowledge will liberate us. Any other kind of knowledge is like only Sushupti. We are there with Brahman, but we don't recognize it. We are in deep sleep. This much is the top target. Can you go back one slide? I don't know if I missed a slide. Can you go back one slide, please? Slide 30. Now go back. Mahesh, can you go to slide 30, please? Go back. No, 30. One. Now we are on slide 6. Go to slide 13. One technical issues. Okay, fine. Leave it. Yeah, I forgot to discuss. Can you bring project this, please? Yeah. Can you make it bigger? Can you read the slides, people? Right. See, one of the points which I forgot to touch upon, river is essentially flowing water, I said. The water aspect of river is Satyam. The Nadi aspect, the flowingness, is only a name and form. The water which is flowing is called Pravaha Satyam. Those of you who know the various kinds of Satyam would have heard a term called Pravaha Satyam or Pravaha Nityam. So, a truth which is apparently flowing in time is called Pravaha Satyam. This is one way to identify Mithya Vastu. all Mithya Vastus are superimposing their Mithya, falseness, on that one Satyam, which is truth. So when you superimpose the Mithyatva on Satyam, it will look as if it is also Satyam. But that Satyam is not absolute. It is called Pravaha Satyam. What does it mean? The name that we gave for that river has got an existence as long as the flowingness is there associated with the waterness, correct? So you will call Jamuna as long as water is there and the water is flowing. If it stops flowing, it will become a pond. It will not be Jamuna river. If there is no water, then there is no river at all. That means no more name. Those rivers which are dried up, they have lost their name in time. You go to some rivers, only the bed is there, no river is there. So this all rivers which have their role as Brahman, meaning here the ocean, they all get absorbed. Okay. What they do is they actually disappear, giving up their name and form. And Ganga, Yamuna is no longer identifiable once it has reached the ocean. Inside the ocean, you cannot say this water came from Yamuna, this came from Ganga, you cannot get. Correct? When the identification is established with the ocean, the substance that is water, Samudram iti Kuruchit, that water which moved into the ocean is now called ocean. Please understand, the river did not get called as ocean. River is always river, ocean is always ocean. But the name now that we give to the water, which was earlier given the name Nadi, river, has now gained the name ocean. So what are we telling? Brahman, which was called water, has now become Brahman, which is the ocean. Concept, if you have to keep in mind, the whole of Vyavahara becomes clear. Otherwise, we will think that one day I will give up my BMI, they will all become Pancha Mahabhutas and merge into Brahman. No. Your essence that you are is Brahman. You can call it as Pancha Mahabhutas or this body or by a name called Anita or Prasanna, does not matter. The names are superimposed, the qualities are superimposed, the colors are superimposed, but essentially you are Brahman. So what is the use of calling yourself Anita today and tomorrow becoming God Anita? Does not make any difference. They are all projections. Or Supergirl Anita, does not matter. So gaining siddhis, becoming great, they're all projections. Essentially what you are remains you. That knowledge alone will liberate. So this Purusha who's possessed of attributes, meaning before he became merged, he had all these attributes. All of them, he is called Puri. Paririshta means one who can see all sides. And the example taken for that is that the sun and the sunlight. Actually, sunlight falls on everything and makes them visible. But what do we say? Sun is the one which is enlightening everything, correct? The same way, this Purusha who is sitting in himself is projecting his Satyajnana Manantam on everything that is not himself, which is visualized by Maya, and making them seem real. That is what is happening here, is what we understand. So then, once you understand this, then all these names, forms, opinions, views, everything will be merged into your essence, which is Purusha, which is Brahman, and you are living.